America's first attempt to launch a satellite. A 6.5-inch sphere weighing just over 3 pounds was checked out by scientists and declared ready. A great wave of advanced publicity focused attention at Cape Canaveral, Florida, for the launching of Test Vehicle 3 of Project Vanguard. A preliminary to the scheduled launching of a 21-pound satellite in March. What happened is already unhappy history. Another setback for the United States in the race into outer space. Here are official Defense Department films of the launching of the 72-foot missile, a loss of thrust, and fall back to Earth in split seconds. Is classified. Neither the satellite program nor our missile development is affected, said Acting Defense Secretary Quarles. It's only an incident in the perfection of the Vanguard satellite system.
Vanguard Test Vehicle 2 stands on the launching pad at Cape Canaveral in the Navy's second attempt to place a satellite into orbit. In its nose, a grapefruit-sized metal sphere. The huge rocket, 3 stages of liquid fuel components, is actually still experimental. For Vanguard, every flight is a test flight. Takeoff is flawless. December 6th, Vanguard 1 lost thrust only 4 feet off the pad and crashed. That flaw was corrected. But in Vanguard's tens of thousands of delicate parts, its miles of electrical circuits, there's room for lots to go wrong. And the slightest malfunction at this stage means this. One circuit in the control system breaks down and Defense Department cameras record a pinwheel of fire. Another disaster for Project Vanguard.
Commander Anderson was approached by the Navy to undertake a completely submerged circumnavigation of the globe. He realized that a better and more strategic opportunity lied not with circumnavigation, but with the North Pole, specifically transiting from the Pacific to the Atlantic Oceans via the North Pole. This would show the ability of the U.S. to reposition submarine assets from the Atlantic Fleet to the Pacific and vice versa without the need of the Panama Canal. And it would prove to the Soviets and the U.S. allies that their country could still be held at risk from submarine-launched missiles by positioning assets off the Soviet coast through an Arctic approach. Captain Arand saw the advantage of the Arctic and championed the idea to President Eisenhower. Over the next few months, Commander Anderson and Captain Arand would meet several times and discuss the Nautilus' potential to traverse the Arctic ice. President Eisenhower's interest in the mission compelled the Navy to look into it further. The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Arleigh Burke, was briefed on the idea and also supported the plan. President Eisenhower then brought in Admiral Burke, Captain Arand, and Commander Duke Bain, a submarine planning officer at the Pentagon, for a final briefing on the mission. President Eisenhower turned to each of the men and uttered the same phrase individually. "I want no one, I mean no one, to announce the success or failure of this attempt until I, personally, indicate where and when the announcement will take place." Commander Anderson brought the officers on board Nautilus in on the mission, and they began planning in earnest. All while plans for a fake mission were made as well to ensure utmost secrecy. Commander Anderson realized that the run to the North Pole from the Atlantic was far easier than from the Pacific. The water was deeper in the Atlantic, and there would be no problem going beneath the ice, with Nautilus' ability to operate in excess of 700 feet. The Pacific side was shallow, so to get that part of the journey over first would ensure Nautilus wouldn't pass the North Pole, only to find she cannot find an open passage to the Pacific and would have to turn around and go back under the pole again. Funny enough, it was not out of irony that the name Operation Sunshine was chosen. It came from Nautilus launching and christening. The day was overcast until the moment when the First Lady, Amy Eisenhower, ship's sponsor, broke the bottle of champagne on her bow and the sun broke through the clouds. Thus the expression started within her crew that the sun always shines on Nautilus. This new equipment included updated ice sensors, developed by Dr. Wally Lyon, that were refined from the run in September of 1957. Also included was a prototype inertial navigator. This system was in use on board U.S. Air Force Navajo missiles to provide guidance as they flew through the air. Now they were modified to be used on board a submarine. Nautilus was the test platform, and the North Pole was the test mission. Nautilus got underway for the Panama Canal in April of 1958. She quickly steamed south and passed through the canal without event. The officers continued to refine their plans as they tested out new equipment on board, but the crew did not know they would be going under the ice again. A slow oil leak had seeped into the lagging of the port high-pressure turbine. This caused smoke to be generated, no more than that of a cigar at first, but it quickly grew so black no one could see in the engine room. There were a total of 4 smoke hoods on board, a device that allowed a person to breathe by filtering the smoke out of the air, and the crew had to take turns wearing the hood to fight the fire or man the required watch stations. They were fighting the fire by feel, trying to find it without getting burned. Finally, they were able to locate the source, and as they peeled back the lagging to spray the flame retardant on the offending equipment, flames erupted, shooting 3 to 4 feet high. The crew fought the fire, and then another crew member was able to operate the auxiliary diesel by touch and feel as the boat came to the surface to ventilate the space and remove the smoke. Commander Anderson met with the engineer officer, Paul Early, to discuss the casualty and what could have been had Nautilus been under the ice. They had a total of 4 smoke hoods for the entire ship. 4 hoods for 115 people. Nautilus needed a system that would be able to provide a source of breathable air to the required watch standards in any given space. Paul Early quickly came up with a design that utilized their existing high-pressure air banks through a pressure-reducing system to provide a breathable source of air, and came up with a design for a mask attached to a hose to connect to that system. This would normally take years to develop and approve a new system for use on board a warship. Nautilus needed it approved and installed within a month. Nautilus pulled into San Diego and then went on to San Francisco. The shipyard and crew installed the new air system and completed their testing with satisfactory results. Nautilus now had a way to provide breathable air to the crew, even if trapped beneath the ice. Torpedoman Theodore Szynski was sitting in crew's mess when he suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and died almost instantly. The crew was shaken. His body was transferred off while transiting into Seattle, and one of the crew members, Joe Degnan, escorted Torpedoman Szynski's body home to Chicago. Commander Anderson traveled under false identification. He posed as Mr. Charles A. Henderson, so as to not give away the secret of the mission. Dr. Lyons, whose job was to study the Arctic ice, and is frequently traveling to Alaska to do so, needed no false identity. They flew to Fairbanks, Alaska, where they spent the night. The following day, they flew on to Nome, and then Kotzebue, Alaska. From here, they boarded a bush pilot's plane and flew over the Bering Strait and the Chukchi Sea. At the end of their flight, the pilot calmly told them that they needed to land now as they were out of fuel. He then headed towards an Inuit village where he had heard bush pilots would store extra cans of gasoline just in case they had this problem. As the engine was sputtering and dying on their landing, they managed to refuel and take off, albeit barely, as they had only a few feet of runway left when their wheels finally lifted off the ground during their takeoff before they hit the trees. Commander Anderson and Dr. Lyons returned to Seattle, and Commander Anderson got the final approval to proceed with the North Pole mission. Admiral Rickover, head of Naval Reactors. The Admiral conducted a 2-hour inspection of the engine room. Upon completion, he sat down with Commander Anderson and passed him a note that provided relaxed operating parameters for the reactor should they be required while under ice. This was the Admiral's way of telling Commander Anderson that he may not like the mission. It did put his prototype submarine at risk, but he believed that the crew could get it done and that the reactor had been designed with enough inherent safety that it would be able to operate in an emergency situation if needed. Nautilus got underway, and while transiting out of Seattle and into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, they painted over the hull numbers so as to maintain her identity secret should they be spotted by anyone while executing their mission. Commander Anderson now told the crew they were going not to the equator, but to the North Pole and on to England. Nautilus proceeded north and originally planned to go on the western side of the Bering Strait, the Soviet Union side, as the water depth was greater. As they closed on the strait, they saw the first of the sea ice and tested out their new equipment with no deficiencies. They quickly saw that the western approach had much thicker ice than expected. Dr. Lyons only had familiarity with the eastern or United States side, so they reversed course back to the south and tried again from the east. They passed through the strait and were working toward the Arctic Circle when the ice thickness began to increase. Commander Anderson had just gone to his stateroom to catch some sleep when the officer of the deck requested his presence in the attack center. They had originally expected no more than 40 feet of ice thickness, but were routinely seeing ice thickness closer to 50 feet. Nautilus was cruising just 40 feet off the ocean floor and was starting to have only 20 to 25 feet of clearance between the top of her sail and the ice above. Commander Anderson ordered her depth increased another 20 feet and was now only 20 feet off the ocean floor. At this depth, anything over a 7-degree angle on the ship would mean the bow or stern would impact the seabed, not to mention the potential of hitting the ice above. Just after he gave the order to increase depth, an even thicker ice keel was announced. It was too late to turn away. All they could do was hope that they cleared the ice. As they go under the keel, the distance between the ice above and the top of the sail is indistinguishable. They barely made it through. Commander Anderson decided it was time to turn back. The ice conditions do not match expectations, and it would be disastrous to make it through one ice keel, only to get trapped on the other side. The problem was the secrecy. They were now going to pull into port for weeks. Much of the crew was going on leave, but no one was allowed to speak a word of what they had done. Commander Anderson and President Eisenhower's staff were worried. They were heading to their naval exercise and had almost reached the equator when they were recalled to Hawaii for some unknown task. Commander Anderson flew back to Washington, D.C. to brief those in the know at the Pentagon on the mission to date. They came up with a plan to send a Nautilus officer, the navigation officer, Shepard Jenks, to evaluate the ice conditions. They flew him to Alaska under the cover that he was working for a branch of the Navy that had no involvement with submarines whatsoever. He left his dolphins at home, as well as all identification that pegged him as a member of the Nautilus or even a submarine officer. Over the next couple of weeks, the ice conditions continued to improve and Nautilus was approved for a second go under the ice. Nautilus got underway from Pearl Harbor on July 22nd and proceeded north at best possible speed. As she closed the Aleutian Island chains, the crew conducted preventative maintenance, verified stowage of supplies and equipment, and trained for casualties they hoped they didn't have to face. The ice reports that Shepard Jenks had arranged while on his undercover mission to Alaska showed the ice conditions continuing to improve as Nautilus prepared to cross the Bering Strait. At one point, her garbage disposal unit failed open. This device had a muzzle door on the bottom of the boat and then a breech door internal. The crew had tried flushing it with water and using high-pressure air, but to no avail. Finally, they surfaced the ship and then evacuated all personnel out of the middle compartment: the wardroom, staterooms, chief's quarters, one of the crew berthings, crew's mess, and the galley. They sealed off the compartment and pressurized it to be equal to the sea pressure so they could override interlocks and clear the obstruction. A cachet was made so that the ship could cancel letters with their unique position in the world stamped onto the envelope. A final flag was determined for the battle flag to fly when pulling into port. Once the water deepened, the transit to the North Pole became relatively uneventful. The ice keels above were thicker than ever before, but Nautilus was cruising at over 20 knots, hundreds of feet below, with thousands of feet between them and the ocean floor. On August 3rd, at 11:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Nautilus was 1,000 yards from the North Pole. Commander Anderson got on the ship-wide announcing circuit, the 1MC.
Distance to the pole, 1,000 yards. Commander William R. Anderson stepped to the microphone in the control room. All hands, this is the captain speaking.
In a few moments, Nautilus will realize a goal long sought by those who have sailed the seas, the attaining of the North Pole. I would like to suggest at this time, as we approach the pole,
That we observe a brief period of silence, dedicated first to He who has guided us so truly. Second, to all those men who have preceded us.
whether to victory or to failure.
And third, in our earnest hopes for world peace. Eight, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. For the USA and the U.S. Navy, the North Pole.
The ship cheered and the celebrations commenced. A cake that had been made for the event was shared by all. Everyone tried to be the first to do something at the North Pole, either by being the first person on board to get to the North Pole, or by being in the forwardmost part of the ship, or the first to take a shower at the North Pole. The list goes on. They even had a visit from a notable world citizen. Santa Claus somehow found his way on board. He proceeded to chastise the crew and Commander Anderson for trespassing on his home during his vacation season, and for operating the garbage disposal unit in his backyard. Commander Anderson pleaded ignorance of the rules and apologized, at which point Santa Claus seemed pleased and declared all the families would have a Merry Christmas that year. On August 6th, at 5:49 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Nautilus surfaced in the Atlantic Ocean and was able to transmit her message, Nautilus 90 North. Nautilus then received instruction to proceed to Reykjavik, Iceland. Commander Anderson was to be transferred off via helicopter and flown straight to Washington, D.C. to be part of President Eisenhower's press briefing. As Commander Anderson was transferred off, he brought with him 1,500 letters, all stamped with the cachet design the crew had selected. He was pulled up into the helicopter and met by Captain Peter Arand, President Eisenhower's naval aide, who handed him a congratulatory telegram from President Eisenhower. Commander Anderson then immediately passed it back down to the XO, Frank Adams, who was now the commanding officer for the journey to Portland. Once back in Washington, D.C., Commander Anderson was immediately taken to the White House, where he was met by a somewhat bewildered but happy to see him wife Bonnie. She had been asked to come down to Washington, D.C. for a special ceremony the day before. She had no idea it was at the White House until she had arrived there. She didn't even know what the ceremony was until she saw her husband. The press had been assembled by the request of the press secretary, Jim Hagerty, with the promise that they would be presented a very good story. At the briefing, President Eisenhower explained what Nautilus had done to a stunned press pool, and then proceeded to present the Presidential Unit Citation to Commander Anderson for the entire crew. This was the first time the Presidential Unit Citation had been awarded in peacetime. Nautilus was sitting off the coast, awaiting Commander Anderson to be flown back to London and then helicoptered back onto Nautilus. Once on board, they transited into port. To say that Nautilus was well received may be a slight understatement. Every ship in port was sounding its whistle. Fireboats were spraying water in the air. Thousands of people lined the shore cheering, and the Royal Marine Band was playing on the pier. Nautilus then raced across the Atlantic to her next port of call, New York City. Again, the ship was welcomed with great fanfare. Fireboats sprayed water in the air. A flotilla of at least 20 destroyers and Coast Guard cutters, tankers, tugboats, and police boats escorted them through the harbor. At the pier was a Marine Honor Guard, a Navy band, and most importantly, the crew's wives got together the night before and came down to New York via charter bus to greet their husbands. Commander Anderson and Nautilus were featured on Life magazine and received honors from around the world for their effort. Nautilus had done what President Eisenhower, the country, and the free world had been so desperate for. They had proven that the Soviet Union was not alone in technological prowess, and they were not invincible. The nation was able to rally behind the ship that the sun always shined on.